anyone see it? Okay, and can you still hear me? Okay, awesome.
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, you're just muted, and so I wasn't sure. I've never done this before. But yeah, so here we have our PowerPoint, prayer labyrinths. I didn't get too fancy with the name. But here you can see this is just an example of a prayer labyrinth. Can you see my mouse as well if I motion like this? Okay, wonderful. So that's just an example. It's a simple one made from stones. And we're going to see that you can make labyrinths from all kinds of things. So what is a prayer labyrinth? So labyrinths are a form of prayer that provides us with a way to involve our whole bodies in the practice of prayer. Labyrinths are a centuries-old tool used to help guide Christians and those of other faiths in prayer and in meditation. Labyrinths are representative of the twists and turns of life. So as you go around the different twists and turns, it kind of represents the way that our own spiritual journeys and our own lives have their different twists and turns. And labyrinths are similar to mazes, except you can't get lost in the labyrinth. Labyrinths have one way in and one way out. So if you follow the path, you'll reach the center, and then you just turn around and go back out. Labyrinths can be adapted to any religion, ability level, age, etc. There's really no limit to how they can be used, what they can be used for. There are so many different options. Labyrinths are walked to relax, to meditate, to pray, or just for fun. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Okay, so this just shows the basic construction of a labyrinth. So you might have noticed that Barb used the word circuit. She mentioned the circuits of the labyrinth. And so this is just kind of a diagram that shows how they work. So you have different circuits. So that's basically different layers to the areas that you can walk in. So this is the entrance. So you'd enter there and you just go, you just keep following and it takes you all the way around and eventually to the center, and then you go back out. So pretty simple. There are tons of different designs, but this is the way that they're constructed. There's a lot of geometry involved, and so it's pretty cool when you see some of the really old ones to see how they were able to use so much, perfect symmetry and all of that since they were made so long ago. So here you can see that there are a variety of different designs. I mean, it's limitless. So this shows 7 different ones, but I mean, this is just the tip of the iceberg. So some of the more popular ones are the round ones. And then there are also ones that are octagons. There are ones that are squares. Just kind of depends on the preference of the person or the organization that are building one. So you can kind of see those there. Next, we have types of prayer labyrinths. So these are sometimes made out of wood. So these are both carved out of wood, and you would use those just like you would use a paper, but some people prefer these because the carved out spaces make it easier for your finger to stay on the path and to trace that. And we also have ceramic finger labyrinths. So ceramics, there are tons of these made out of ceramics. You can go on Etsy or just Google ceramic finger labyrinths, and there are hundreds of them that artists have made and that they're selling. So that's pretty cool too, and it's just preference. This one's made out of plastic, just simple. This one is paper. She's tracing a paper just like the ones that came in your Lenten bags. And I showed you an example before of one that's crocheted. And then I have a picture of one that's tattooed. So some people actually get them tattooed if it's just a super meaningful spiritual practice for them. And I have a friend, and she had one tattooed I think she got it on her thigh. So she got it tattooed on the front of her thigh. And sometimes she would sit in class and she would have an ink pen and she would trace the lines. But, you know, for her, it was something she could do to relax. And I think she had, you know, some issues with anxiety and things like that. And so for her, it was something, always having that labyrinth with her was just very helpful for her. And it was something she could do if she needed a moment of calm and peace in all of the stress of life. So yeah, so this just shows you that there are a million ways that people make labyrinths and use labyrinths. And so let's see what's next. Okay, so now we're on to walking prayer labyrinths. So walking prayer labyrinths are, like I said, like the most popular way to do it. But the finger labyrinths provide a good opportunity for a portable labyrinth, something you can take with you on the go, something you can have at home, because a lot of people don't have yards and don't have a way to engage this practice without going somewhere. And so, yeah, so some people like to do that, but walking labyrinths are definitely the most popular way of doing a prayer labyrinth. So this one's made of stones. This looks like probably pretty similar to the one at Cane Ridge West. So that's a pretty simple way to do it. You just clear out the grass and everything from an area and then line up the stones. And it does take time because you have to measure it all out. Making a labyrinth is kind of a process, but I've made a few and it can be kind of exhausting, but it's worth it when you get to walk it. But that's one example. And what you can see here is that sometimes they are made out of tile and, you know, it's all lined up perfectly. And that can be done outside, but that's also often done you often find those in the floor of really old churches and cathedrals. They will actually have the labyrinth built into the floor of the church, of the sanctuary or whatever space it is. So that's pretty neat. So that's an example of that. We also have here, this is a big canvas one. So the canvas ones are really popular now because you can take them on the go, take them to different places, and you can also roll it up when you're done. So you don't have to have it permanently painted or put into the carpet of your church. You can just roll it out when you want to use it for a special service or special event and then roll it right back up. So that's one of the most popular ones that you'll see today. And then some of them are made with like a combination of grass and rocks. It's all just really, there are a million ways to do it. So it just kind of depends on resources, finances, space available, all of those things. This one I thought was pretty cool. This one is actually made out of canned food. So they set this one up temporarily. I think I read it just briefly about it when I found the picture, but I think that they had done like a food drive and then they used the cans to make this and, you know, somehow incorporate that into thinking about why they collected the food and everything and praying about that. So I thought that was really creative, and that just shows that you can really make them out of anything at all, anything you can think of. Okay, so on to the history. So the history of labyrinths. So the earliest rock carvings dating back to over 4,000 years ago included depictions of labyrinths. So these have been found in like every society virtually for thousands of years. And they have at times been used by Christians, but also by tons of different other religions and societies. And so they've also been found in ancient artworks, pottery, coins, drawings from around the world, in places such as India, Afghanistan, Rome, Ukraine, Iceland, Crete, Egypt, Sumatra, and the United States, because some of the indigenous cultures in our country have actually made their own of these labyrinths long time ago. But yeah, so they've basically been found everywhere. Labyrinths are present in Greek mythology, and some of the oldest labyrinths feature mythological characters. So some of the labyrinths have like minotaurs and other creatures from mythology that are like built into the design. So that's pretty cool. And let's see. Oh, here's an example. So this is not a Christian labyrinth, but this is a labyrinth. I'm not going to try to say this, but the old Summer Palace in Beijing, China. It was built in 1709 in the time of the Qing dynasty. And I thought it was pretty cool though, because this one had walls built up. But something that makes this a little different than a maze that oftentimes has walls is that it's shorter. So people can still see the center and they can still see the exit. And so again, there's no aim to try to trip people up or make them get lost in there with the labyrinth. But I thought that was pretty cool. I hadn't really seen one like that with walls. Okay, so history of prayer labyrinths again. The first explicitly Christian labyrinth dates back to 324 AD in the Basilica of Saint Reparatus in Algeria. So that's in Northern Africa. So 324 AD, that's a really, really long time ago, obviously, but they think Jesus died around 30 to 33 AD. And so that's, you know, quite a long time ago, just less than 300 years after Jesus's death. So this labyrinth contained the words Sancta Ecclesia, meaning holy church. And that's one thing that distinguished it from other non-Christian labyrinths. They included those words in the center, and they wanted to make it very well known that this was a Christian labyrinth, because labyrinths were popular in other non-Christian religions and cultures at that time, but they wanted to make it known that this one was explicitly Christian. So the style of the labyrinth is squared. And so it's very similar to the Roman labyrinths of the time. And it featured sharp angles and squared designs, which is different than a lot of the circular ones that you've seen. And early Christians, they oftentimes sought to find ways to make Christianity relatable to people who weren't already Christians, and to find ways to take symbols from other religions or non-religious symbols and assign Christian meaning to that. And so the squared design was very popular with the Romans, and so they made it in that same shape for the first Christian one. And that was a way to try to help them to understand their religion better and to connect Christianity with things from their own experiences and the things that they had seen that weren't explicitly Christian. So here is the first Christian labyrinth that we know of. People were probably using them way before, but this is the first time we've really seen it. So this is the labyrinth in the Basilica of Saint Reparatus in Algeria. It's like a replica. But one really cool thing I noticed was when I was reading about it, is that you can see that it says that in the middle, the Sancta Ecclesia, and it's a palindrome. So palindrome is a word that any way you read it, any way you look at it, it's still going to say the same thing. And so the cool thing about that is no matter where you're standing in the labyrinth, no matter what angle you're looking at it from, it's still going to say the same thing. So I thought that was really, really neat. Okay. So again, a little bit more history. So medieval labyrinths began to gain popularity in the 9th and 10th centuries. And in the 11th and 12th centuries, they were often featured on the walls and floors of churches in Italy. And then those were soon brought to other parts of Europe, and that just grew like wildfire all over Europe. To the point where in the Middle Ages, nearly 25% of cathedrals, European cathedrals, they featured a labyrinth built in to the floor or outside. In some way, a quarter of all of the churches had these, which is pretty crazy that we hardly use them at all anymore compared to that. But you can see that the very ancient roots of this. So one of the most popular labyrinths from this time period is the Chartreuse Cathedral Labyrinth. And so that is likely the most well-known labyrinth design in the whole world. And so here it is. So this is the labyrinth inside of the Chartreuse Cathedral in France. As I said, it's like the most popular design ever. It's considered the most walked labyrinth in the world. It was built in 1205, and you can see it's built directly into the floor. Monks originally walked the labyrinth for contemplative and prayerful moments. And this one fact I thought was interesting. It said that when they were praying for forgiveness or prayers of repentance, they would actually walk the labyrinth on their knees, which sounds miserable to me because I hate doing anything on my knees, and then to do it on that hard tile floor just sounds painful. But I guess because of the kind of prayer they were praying, they wanted that experience. So now pilgrims travel from all around the world to walk the labyrinth. And also, that's one thing I don't know if I mentioned it later, but for some people, for some early Christians, this was an alternative journey to going to Jerusalem. So rather than going to Jerusalem or the Holy Land, if that wasn't accessible, people would walk a labyrinth, and that was kind of a alternative that was more accessible and affordable for the average person. So this is one thing also that's interesting, is this is still an active cathedral. So people travel from all around the world to walk this cathedral, but they have to make sure that they are there on a Friday, because every other day of the week they're having the Catholic worship services, and they have chairs set up because that's their floor. That's the floor of their sanctuary. So I thought that was just interesting to think about, that you have to make sure that you plan your trip just right. So contemporary uses. There's a lot more history I could cover, but just for time's sake, we'll move on. So contemporary uses of prayer labyrinths. So these are oftentimes found at Christian camps, at retreat centers, hospitals, churches, spas, and public and private parks. And they oftentimes feature a prayer labyrinth. And many Christians around the world have been installing labyrinths in their yards and gardens because we're kind of in a resurgence, or I'm trying to think the word, I don't know, I don't know, but it's basically gotten really, really popular in recent years, much more so. So a lot of people are incorporating them into their homes and their yards. And one example, I actually saw that the UCC church here in town has one right outside of their building. So I thought that was pretty cool. But yeah, so there are the portable versions that you saw, like the one that's put on a big canvas. And so that can be taken around to different conferences, to schools, and to prisons, like for prison ministry. So those are used as a ministry tool. And that's why it's sometimes nice to have the ones that are portable, because sometimes people can't come to you, or it's easier to take it to them. And also in my last community I lived in, there were a couple of the churches who had the canvas ones, and other churches would borrow them from that church and things like that. So it is estimated that there are more than 5,000 prayer labyrinths in the US alone. So that's quite a lot. So that just shows that they are still very popular. And here, find a labyrinth near you. So if you want to walk a labyrinth, you're going to be thinking, okay, but how do I find a labyrinth? And I think I included this information on one of the handouts in your Lenten bag. But you visit this website, Labyrinth Locator, or just Google Labyrinth Locator. And then right here, you can see the big red arrow. You just go down here and you type in whatever information. So you can do the zip code and all of that, or you can just choose the state. You can type the city and state. You can search however you want to, and you can set also like set a radius. So if you want to find one within 3 hours of you, you can do that. So that's good if you want to find one local to us here in Helena, but you could also use that if you're on like vacation and you want to know if there are any labyrinths near you. So that's labyrinthlocator.com. And they have more information, some more information about labyrinths, but this is probably the best way to locate one. Just go to this tool here. And so I went over there and I typed in Montana. And so it pulled up all the labyrinths in Montana. So I'll show you that on the next slide. So it's kind of blurry, but it says here 17 labyrinths found. So that was when I searched Montana. There are 17 labyrinths on here in Montana. Now, some of those may no longer be available, or there may be more that are available that it hasn't been updated or something, but I think it's pretty cool that even in Montana, there are 17 labyrinths. And when I looked a few weeks ago and I looked at the ones that were in Helena, I think there were like 3 or 4 in Helena. And I know there's at least a few in Bozeman. So if you want to walk a labyrinth, it's not as hard to find one as you might think it would be. So let's see here. Okay, so you might be wondering, are labyrinths found in scripture? Well, the word labyrinth or a translation of it is not found in the Bible, but the scriptures do speak about following God's way, going on spiritual journeys, and enjoying God's presence. So these are all central themes of labyrinth experiences, because you're going a certain way. You can't get off that track. You're going on a journey to the center of the labyrinth, and oftentimes people will stop in the middle of the labyrinth to enjoy God's presence. So those are all themes of scripture that also tie into a labyrinth experience. So in Psalm 16:11, it says, "You show me the path of life. In your presence, there is fullness of joy." And then in John 14:16, Jesus says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." And so you can kind of see that there's a connection with that. And there are a lot of things that are not explicitly spoken about in scripture, but are still meaningful practices that we observe today. So let's see. Okay, so walking a labyrinth. So there's no correct way to walk a labyrinth. Just like praying with prayer beads or the other practices we've talked about, it's all about finding a way to connect that to your own spiritual journey and to make that meaningful for you. So one person might use a method that doesn't mean anything to another person. And again, whatever you do, if it helps you connect with God, you're doing it right. So different people use them in different ways. You can walk as quickly or as slowly as you want to. I have done this with people who just crept along. I mean, I wondered if they were even moving because they were walking so slowly. And then I have done it with especially children who don't quite grasp what's going on, and they are like little speed demons. They're just racing through. So I recommend somewhere in the middle, but you can take as long as you want. You can stop in the middle of the labyrinth and stand there for 5 minutes. You can do whatever you want because it's your journey, and there's no need to keep up with anyone else. Even if you're walking it and there are other people walking it at the same time, oftentimes, just people just step to the side and let them pass, and there's no expectation that you're keeping any pace other than what's comfortable for you. So it might look intimidating at first if you've only ever experienced mazes, but you can't get lost and you can't do it wrong. So you just start walking and you'll end up in the middle, and then it'll be fine. So there are suggested methods for walking a labyrinth, but they're just suggestions. So I'm going to go over a couple of those different methods or things you could do, but they're just suggestions. So make the experience your own. And, with any spiritual practice, the focus is you making it the most beneficial for you, and only you know how to do that. So, make the most of your time. Don't waste your time doing something that's not meaning anything to you. So, okay, so these are just 2 ideas for how you could walk a labyrinth. So you could pray for others on your way to the center, and then stop and enjoy God's presence in the center for however long you want, for 30 seconds or 15 minutes, doesn't matter. And then as you go back out, instead of praying for others, you pray for yourself as you move back to the entrance. So that's one option. Most of the different ways you can walk a labyrinth are going to be broken down into 3 moves. So there's your move into the labyrinth, you're doing something. And then at the center, you're doing something. And then on your way out, you're doing something. So that's kind of the main way that it works normally. Another method. So while you're walking in, you can be thinking about the baggage that you need to drop off or leave inside the labyrinth. So it could be the thing that you feel like stops you from being closer to God, the pain that you've been carrying or the trauma, whatever it is, you're thinking about that thing and thinking about, gosh, I wish I could just set this down and just leave it behind here. And then when you reach the center, you can sit there or stand there for a few minutes. You can pray about that thing that you want to leave behind and ask God to, remove that burden, take that away from you, whatever it is, and imagine yourself just setting it down and leaving it there. And then as you leave, you're again picturing that you have left that baggage at the center of the labyrinth, and hopefully then you'll leave the labyrinth feeling lighter and feeling like, okay, I've turned that thing over. I don't have to carry it anymore, and it may sound cheesy. It's not like immediately whatever challenge you're having is going to go away, right? But sometimes those things, those spiritual experiences like walking a labyrinth or engaging in some of these other practices, they can be transformative and they can be really helpful in ways that you might not expect. I've seen people get like really emotional in the labyrinth and start crying, and it seems crazy because it's just rocks, laid out on the ground or something. But I think that's what makes it a spiritual practice, right? That, it's not just humans doing things, but there's, some greater power connecting to us and reaching out to us. So just, I think you have to go into a labyrinth with, like any spiritual practice, with a very open mind, just ready for whatever you might experience, because you might be surprised by that. And then next, so this is a very common method. This is probably, I would say, like the most popular method. And it involves 3 different stages. So the first stage is releasing. So this is as you're walking in. So you're releasing as you're walking in. So you take a deep breath and you begin your walk to the center. This is a time to calm yourself, to get focused, and to center yourself. As you start on your journey towards the center, you begin to release your thoughts and concerns. The different things you may have been carrying. So releasing your pain, your stress, your expectations that other people have for you, or expectations that you've placed on yourself. Just kind of releasing all of the things. So stage 1 is releasing. And then we go to stage 2, which is receiving. So this stage 2 is just basically your time in the center. So the center is a place where you are receiving, you're gaining something from your walk. So what you receive from the center might change each time you walk. So it kind of depends on what you might have been praying about as you were walking. You might feel that you receive, a different message from God, or a different feeling, depending on where you're at and what you're praying about in that walk. So in the center, maybe you just need a moment of peace and quiet, and you could be receiving that moment of peace. You need a space to contemplate and think. You need a place to just sit and pray. All of that is okay. So you just stay at the center as long as you like, until you feel like you've received whatever it is that you needed from that experience. So the second stage is receiving. And then the final stage is returning. So this is just your journey back out from the center of the labyrinth back out into the world. So you return to the world, bringing with you the sense of peace, the clarity, the insight, whatever else you think you may have gained through your journey into the labyrinth. So one of the other ones we went over was, leaving something in the labyrinth, but you can also focus on what are you taking away from the labyrinth. So again, very adaptable to your preferences, your situation, whatever you're looking to get out of it, it's going to be different for each of us. So those are the 3 steps. So we had step 1, releasing, step 2, receiving, and then step 3, returning. But you can do those in all different ways. And you can also just walk the labyrinth and just pray, and just walk in and out and pray. Like, you don't have to feel any pressure to do any special method, or to feel like you have to get it right, or, oh, what was the 3rd step? It doesn't matter. Just pray and just enjoy the moment. And that is my PowerPoint. And then I am going to stop sharing my screen. Yeah. And so then I was just going to open it up to thoughts or reflections about everything, or questions I might have to answer.